Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we return to that gentle realm of old magic and quiet wonder. If this bedtime journey soothes, you feel free to like, subscribe, and share where you're listening from. Now relax, because tonight we continue with the timeless tales of the Red Fairy Book. Let's step softly into the next story. Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we drift once more into a world where magic lingers in the air, where ancient forests whisper secrets, and where every shadow might hide a miracle. If these quiet bedtime journeys bring you comfort, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. I love imagining all of us scattered across the world, sharing this same peaceful moment together. Now, let your breathing slow. Let the day gently fade behind you. Allow the soft glow of story light to guide you, because tonight we open again the gilded pages of the Red Fairy Book, a treasury of timeless wonder, brave hearts, curious creatures, and spells woven long ago. So settle in, close your eyes, if you wish, and let's step softly into the next enchanted tale. The Master Thief. Once upon a time, there lived a poor farmer who had 3 sons. He loved them dearly, but he had no land to leave them, no money to divide, and no sure way to set them up in life. He worried about their future until at last he made a hard decision. He told his sons they were free to choose any path they wished, any trade, any destination, whatever their hearts could imagine. He said he would walk with them for part of the way, and so he did. He traveled beside them until they came to a crossroads where 3 roads met. There, each son chose a different road. The father said goodbye, watched them disappear one by one, and then turned back home alone. What became of the 2 older brothers, no one ever truly found out. But the youngest son, he wandered far and wide. One night, as he was traveling through a vast forest, a terrible storm crashed down on him without warning. The wind roared so violently, and the rain fell so hard, he could barely keep his eyes open. Before he even realized it, he had lost the path completely. No road, no trail, only darkness, whipping branches, and the sound of the storm swallowing the world. Still, he kept moving forward, step by step, until at last he saw a faint light deep among the trees. It was distant and small, but it was hope. He headed toward it, and after a long, exhausting struggle through the wind and mud, he finally reached a large house glowing warmly from within. The fire inside burned bright enough that he knew the people were still awake. He stepped inside and found an old woman busy with her work. "Good evening, Mother," the young man said. "Good evening," the old woman replied. "Whew, what a terrible night out there," he said. "It surely is," she answered. "Could I sleep here and take shelter for the night?" he asked. The old woman's hands paused, and her eyes sharpened with fear. "It wouldn't be good for you to stay," she warned. "If the people of this house come home and find you here, they'll kill both you and me." "What kind of people live here?" the young man asked. "Robbers," the old woman whispered. "The worst sort. They stole me away when I was little, and I've had to keep house for them ever since." The young man looked toward the storm beyond the door and shook his head. "Even so," he said, "I'm staying. No matter what happens, I'm not going back out into that weather tonight." "Well then," the old woman muttered, "it'll be the worse for you." The young man lay down on a nearby bed, but he didn't dare fall asleep. And it was a good thing he didn't, because before long, the robbers returned. The old woman told them a stranger had arrived, and she hadn't been able to drive him away. "Did you check if he's got any money?" one robber asked. "He doesn't look like the kind who carries money," she answered. "He's a tramp. If he's got anything at all, it's the clothes on his back." The robbers gathered close, muttering in low voices about what to do, whether to kill him or what use he might be. And then the young man stood up, calm, as if he were speaking to ordinary travelers rather than thieves. "If you're looking for a servant," he said, "I'd be glad to work for you. I think I could enjoy serving men like you." The robbers stared at him. "You can stay," one of them said at last. "If you're willing to take up the trade, we follow." "It makes no difference to me," the young man said. "When I left home, my father told me I could choose any trade I pleased. And you've got a taste for stealing?" the robbers asked. "Yes," the boy said, because he figured a trade like that couldn't take too long to learn. Not far away lived a man who owned 3 oxen. He planned to take one ox into town to sell. The robbers had heard about it, and they gave the young man his first test if he could steal the ox from the man on the road without the man noticing and without harming him. The boy could become their servant. The young man set out and took with him a fine shoe with a silver buckle that lay around the robber's house. He placed it in the road, where the farmer would pass with the ox, then slipped into the woods and hid beneath a bush. Before long, the man came along and spotted the shoe immediately. "That's a fine shoe," the man said aloud. "If only I had the other one, I'd take them home, and maybe, just maybe, it would put my old woman in a good mood for once." For the man had a wife so sharp-tempered and cruel that peace in that household was rare. Still, he told himself one shoe was useless without its match, so he left it and continued on. The moment he passed, the young man snatched up the shoe, raced through the forest by a shortcut, and placed it farther up the road. Soon the man arrived and saw it again. Now he was furious with himself. "I was a fool," he grumbled. "If I'd taken the first shoe, I'd have a pair. I'm going back for it. Then I'll bring home good shoes, and maybe my wife will say one kind word to me for once." He turned back and searched and searched. But of course the first shoe was gone. At last he returned, frustrated, holding only the second one. But while he searched, the young man had quietly taken the ox and led it away. When the farmer reached the spot where he had left his ox and found it gone, he wailed in despair. He feared his wife would kill him when she learned what happened. Then, suddenly, an idea struck him. He would go home, take the second ox without his wife noticing, and sell that one instead. He hurried home, slipped the ox away, and headed toward town again. Careful, so very careful, that his wife didn't know. But the robbers knew by their magic, and they sent the young thief after him again. If he could steal the second ox the same way without harm, and without the man noticing, the boy would be counted equal among them. This shouldn't be too hard, the youth thought. This time he took a rope, slipped it under his arms, and tied himself to a tree branch hanging over the road. So he looked like a man who had hanged himself. Soon, the farmer came along with the ox and saw the body swaying there. "What misery must you have known to do that to yourself?" he muttered. "But you'll stay there for me. I can't bring you back to life." And he walked on. But the instant he passed, the youth dropped down, raced by a shortcut through the woods, and hung himself again on another tree ahead. The farmer saw the body again and felt his stomach twist. "I'd like to know if you truly hanged yourself, or if you're some kind of goblin tricking my eyes," he said. "Either way, Hang there for me." He continued forward. And once again, the young thief repeated the trick, jumping down, running ahead, and hanging himself in the middle of the road a third time. Now the farmer stopped cold. "This is foul business," he told himself. 3 men, all hanged no. This has to be witchcraft. I'll know the truth. If the other 2 are still hanging behind me, then it's real. If they aren't, then it's witchcraft. He tied up his ox and ran back, staring up at every branch, searching for the other bodies. And while he ran, the young thief dropped down, untied the ox, and led it away. When the farmer returned and saw the ox was gone, rage and grief nearly tore him apart. Still, he tried to calm himself. "I'll go home," he decided. "I'll take the 3rd ox without my wife knowing. I'll sell it, well, get a good price, and maybe I can survive this." So he went home, again took the last ox in secret, and drove it toward town. But the robbers knew once more, and they told the youth if he could steal the 3rd ox as he had stolen the first 2, he would become master of them all. The youth went to the wood and waited. As the farmer approached with the ox, the young thief began to bellow loudly from within the trees, just like a great ox somewhere deep in the forest. The farmer's head snapped up. His heart leapt. "That sounds like my big bullock," he cried. "If it's him, then I might find the others too." He quickly tied up the 3rd ox and ran into the woods searching for the sound. And while he did, the young thief calmly walked off with the ox. When the farmer returned and found he had lost the last one, his fury had no limits. He wept, raged, and for days he didn't dare go home. He was terrified his wife would kill him outright. The robbers were not pleased either. They were forced to admit the youth was now above them all. And because they hated that truth, they decided to set him a task they believed no one could manage. One day, they left the house together, abandoning him there alone. But the moment they were gone, the youth acted. He drove the oxen out onto the road and sent them home to the farmer he had stolen them from. The farmer was overjoyed to see them returned. Then the young man brought out all the robbers' horses and loaded them with the finest treasures he could find: gold and silver vessels, magnificent clothes, and every valuable thing within reach. Before he left, he told the old woman to greet the robbers for him, thank them kindly, and say that he had gone away, and that they would have a hard time ever finding him again. Then he rode off. After a long, long journey, he reached the road he had once traveled when he first found the robbers. And when he came near his home and could see his father's cottage in the distance, he changed into a uniform he had taken, one made like a general's. He drove into the yard as if he were a great man, then stepped into the house and asked for lodging. His father looked at him stunned. "No, indeed," the old man said. "How could I lodge a gentleman like you? I can barely find clothes and bedding for myself, and poor ones at that." "You were always a hard man," the youth replied, "and you're still hard if you refuse to shelter your own son." "My son," the farmer whispered. "Are you my son?" "Don't you recognize me?" the young man asked. At last the father saw it, his face, his eyes, and he cried out in amazement. "But what trade have you taken up?" "He said that you've become such a great man so quickly." The youth smiled. "Father, he said you told me I could choose any trade I liked. So I apprenticed myself to thieves and robbers. I served my time, and now I have become the master thief." Now it happened that the governor of the province lived near the farmer's cottage. This governor was so wealthy, he barely knew how much money he possessed, and he had a daughter who was pretty refined, wise, and good. The master thief decided he would marry her. He told his father to go to the governor and ask for the girl's hand, and if the governor asked what trade the young man followed, he should say plainly, "He is a master thief." The father thought his son had gone mad, but the master thief would not be refused. He threatened the old man with a birch stick until, weeping and trembling, the father went to the governor's house and told his story, how he had 3 sons, how they left, and how the youngest had returned and forced him to come asking for the governor's daughter, calling himself a master thief. The governor burst into laughter. Well, he said, "Tell your son he must prove it. If he can steal the roast right off the spit in my kitchen on Sunday, while all of us are watching it, then he shall have my daughter." When the father brought back the message, the master thief only nodded. He caught 3 live hares and put them into a bag. On Sunday morning, he dressed himself in ragged clothes so he looked like a pitiful beggar boy, and he slipped into the passage with his bag. The governor and the entire household stood in the kitchen, watching the roast with sharp eyes. While they watched, the master thief quietly let one hair slip from his bag into the courtyard. The hare darted away, racing around the yard. "Look at that hare!" people cried, and some wanted to run out and catch it. The governor saw it and said, "Let it go. There's no catching a hare once it's running." Not long after, the youth let another hare out. The household saw it and assumed it was the same hare again. They wanted to chase it, but once more, the governor said it wasn't worth the trouble. Then the master thief released the third hare, and it sprinted around the courtyard fast and wild. The household still believed it was the same hare, only now the governor's eyes lit with temptation. "That is a remarkably fine hare," he said. "Come, let's see if we can catch it." Out he went, and everyone went with him, chasing in earnest. And while they ran and shouted and grew hot and breathless, the master thief stepped into the kitchen, lifted the roast right off the spit, and vanished. Whether the governor had roast meat for dinner that day, no one can say. But this much is certain: he had no roast hare, no matter how long he chased. At noon, a priest came to visit, and when the governor confessed what had happened, the priest laughed at him without mercy. "I cannot imagine," the priest said, "ever being made a fool of by a fellow like that. I advise you to be careful," the governor warned, "because he may come to you before you even realize it." But the priest mocked him again and again. Later that afternoon, the master thief returned to claim the governor's daughter, as promised. The governor, trying to speak smoothly, told him he must show more skill. Then he added, with a sly look toward the priest, "If you can play a really good trick on that priest who is inside calling me a fool, then we shall see." The master thief said it would not be difficult at all. That evening, he disguised himself as an angel, draping a great white sheet over his body, fastening goose wings to his back, and climbing into a large maple tree in the priest's garden. When the priest returned home, a voice called from the branches, "Father Lawrence." "Father Lawrence," the priest froze. "Who is calling me?" "I am an angel," the voice said, "sent to tell you that, because of your great piety, you shall be taken alive into heaven. Prepare yourself next Monday night. But first, gather all your gold and silver and worldly treasures and place them in a heap in your best parlor." The priest fell to his knees and thanked the angel with tears. The following Sunday, he preached a farewell sermon, telling everyone that an angel had come down into the maple tree and promised to take him bodily into heaven. The whole church wept, young and old alike. On Monday night, the angel returned. The priest thanked him again and again, and when the angel told him to climb into a sack so he could be carried upward, the priest obeyed without question. The moment the priest was inside, the master thief dragged him away, bumping him over stones and roots and ruts. "Ah, ah," cried the priest from inside the sack. "Where are you taking me?" "This is the road to heaven," the master thief said. "The road to heaven is not an easy one." He dragged him until the priest felt half dead, then finally threw the sack into the governor's goose house. Instantly, the geese hissed and pecked their sharp beaks, tormenting the priest until he thought he might die. Oh, oh, where am I now? The priest cried. Now you are in purgatory, the master thief answered. And while the priest suffered among the geese, the thief went straight to the priest's parlor and carried off every piece of gold, silver, and treasure piled there. In the morning, when the goose girl came to let out the geese, she heard groaning from the sack. "Heavens, who's in there?" she cried. "Oh," the priest moaned, "if you are an angel, let me out and send me back to earth. No place has ever been as terrible as this. The little fiends pinch me with their tongs. I'm no angel," the girl said, opening the sack. "I only tend the governor's geese, and they're the little fiends who pinched you." The priest stumbled out, furious and humiliated. "This is the master thief's doing," he shrieked. "My gold, my silver, my best clothes." And he ran home so fast the goose girl thought madness had taken him. When the governor learned what had happened, he laughed until he nearly choked. But when the master thief came again for the governor's daughter, the governor still tried to delay him. He said, "One more proof. I have 12 horses in my stable, and I will put 12 stable boys there, one on each horse. If you can steal the horses from under them, then I will do what I can." The master thief agreed, but demanded assurance that the governor would keep his word. The governor promised. That night, the master thief bought enough brandy to fill 2 flasks. In one flask, he poured brandy alone. In the other, he mixed in a sleeping drink. He hired 11 men to wait, hidden behind the stable. Then he borrowed a ragged old gown and jerkin from an elderly woman, took a staff, and a sack and hobbled toward the stable, disguised as a miserable old beggar. The stable boys were busy watering the horses when they noticed her. "What do you want? Here?" one snapped. "Oh dear, oh dear," she whimpered, shivering dramatically. "It's so cold. A poor old body might freeze to death. For the love of heaven, let me sit just inside the stable door." "Not a chance," one boy barked. "Get out. If the governor sees you here, we'll all pay for it." But another felt pity. "She can't harm anyone," he said. "Let her sit there." While they argued and fussed with the horses, the old woman crept farther inside until she sat behind the door. Soon, no one paid attention to her at all. As the night deepened, the stable boys grew miserably cold, sitting still on horseback. "Ooh, this is brutal," one said, rubbing his arms. "My teeth are chattering." Another complained. "If we had tobacco," a third muttered. Someone had a little, and they shared it, chewing and spitting, but it didn't warm them for long. Then the old woman began to chatter her teeth loudly and groan, and she pulled out the flask of plain brandy, making sure they could see it. Her hands trembled as she raised it, and she took an exaggerated gulp. "What's that in your flask?" one boy asked. "Oh, it's only a drop of brandy," she said timidly. "Brandy," all 12 cried at once. "Give us some." "Just a drop." "Oh, but there's hardly any," she whined. "It won't even wet your mouths." They begged and demanded until she finally sighed and pulled out the other flask, the one with the sleeping drink. She offered it around, careful and steady, now giving each boy just enough. Before the 12th finished, the first was already snoring in the saddle. One by one, they all slipped into sleep. At once, the master thief threw off his disguise, lifted the sleeping boys gently off their horses, and set them astride the stall partitions. Then he called his 11 men, and together they rode away with every horse. In the morning, the governor found the stable boys just waking, spurring and kicking at wooden boards, falling off, clinging foolishly, blinking like men who had lost their wits. The governor scolded them harshly and had them beaten for failing to keep watch. Later that day, the master thief appeared and told the governor exactly what he had done. He asked again for the daughter, but the governor offered him $100 instead and demanded a greater feat still. "Can you steal my horse from under me?" the governor said. "While I am out riding." The master thief said it could be done if he could be certain the daughter would truly be his. The governor promised again, and set a day when he would ride out to a wide common where soldiers drilled. The master thief prepared carefully. He found an old, worn-out mare and made a collar for her from green branches. He bought a shabby cart and a great cask. Then he approached a poor old beggar woman and offered her $10 if she would climb into the cask and keep her mouth open beneath the tap hole where he would place his finger. No harm would come to her. He promised she would only be driven a short while, and if he removed his finger more than once, she would earn $10 more. Then he disguised himself in rags, stained his face with soot, and wore a wig and a great goat hair beard, so no one could recognize him. He drove the mare and cart to the parade ground, where the governor had already been riding. The mare moved so slowly, the cart barely seemed to travel at all. Forward a little, back a little, stopping, straining. So the governor never suspected this shabby driver might be the master thief. The governor rode up and asked if the man had seen anyone hiding in the nearby woods. "No," the man said. "If you'll ride into those woods and search carefully," the governor offered, "and pay you well for your trouble." The disguised thief shook his head. "I'm not sure I can," he said. "I'm bringing this cask of mead to a wedding, but the tap fell out on the road. Now I have to keep my finger in the tap hole or it'll all spill." "Oh, go on," the governor said. "I'll look after the cask and the horse." The disguised thief agreed, but begged the governor to be careful to place his finger in the hole the very moment the man removed his. The governor promised. The master thief mounted the governor's horse and rode off toward the woods. Time passed. The governor waited. The man didn't return. At last, the governor's hand ached, and his patience wore thin. He pulled his finger away for just a moment. From inside the cask, the old woman cried, "Now I'll get $10 more." The governor jolted back in shock. He realized at once what kind of mead he had been guarding. Furious, he headed home only to meet his servant bringing his horse back, because the master thief had already taken it home. The next day, the master thief returned again, demanding the governor's daughter as promised. The governor stalled him with polite words, paid him $300, and insisted on one last masterpiece. "Can you steal the sheet off our bed?" the governor said. "And my wife's nightgown." The master thief said it was possible, though he wished winning the daughter were as easy as stealing cloth. Late that night, he went to the gallows, cut down the body of a thief who had been hanged, and carried it away over his shoulders. He brought a long ladder, set it against the governor's bedroom window, climbed up, and lifted the dead man's head, so it bobbed up and down, like someone peeking in. "There's the master thief, Mother," the governor whispered, nudging his wife. "Now I'll shoot him." His wife tried to stop him. "No, you arranged for him to come," she said. But the governor aimed again and again. Each time he caught sight of the head, it vanished. Finally, he fired. The body fell with a heavy thud, and at once the master thief slid down and disappeared into the night. The governor sat up uneasy. "People talk," he muttered. "If they see a dead body in my yard, it will be trouble. I'd better bury him," his wife agreed, and the governor got up, went downstairs, and stepped outside. The instant he left, the master thief slipped into the house and went straight upstairs to the governor's wife. In the darkness, she believed he was her husband returning. "Well, dear," she said sleepily, "are you done already?" "Oh, yes," the master thief answered, mimicking the governor's voice. "I only put him in a hole and raked a little earth over him. The weather is awful, so I couldn't do more tonight. But give me the sheet to wipe myself. He was bleeding, and I'm covered in blood from carrying him." Without hesitation, she handed over the sheet. "I'll need your nightgown too," he said. "The sheet won't be enough." She gave him the nightgown as well. Then, as if remembering something, he said he'd forgotten to lock the door and went downstairs, taking the sheet and nightgown with him, and vanished into the dark. An hour later, the real governor returned. "What a long time it took you to lock the door," his wife said. "And what did you do with the sheet and my nightgown?" The governor froze. "What are you talking about?" She explained what he had asked for. The governor felt his stomach drop. "Good heavens," he said. "He's fooled me again." When morning came, the master thief returned once more, asking for the governor's daughter, as promised. This time, the governor dared not refuse. He gave the girl to him in marriage and provided a great deal of money. Besides, because he feared that if he did not, the master thief might steal even the eyes from his head, and the governor would be mocked forever for being outwitted so completely. And so the master thief lived well and happily from that day on. Whether he ever stole again, no one can truly say. But if he did, it was only for pastime. Brother and sister. Brother took sister by the hand and said, "Listen, we haven't had a single happy hour since Mother died. our stepmother, beats us every day, and if we so much as come near her, she kicks us away. She feeds us nothing but hard, dry crusts. Why, even the dog under the table has it better than we do. He gets a good bite now and then. Oh, if our dear mother only knew. Come on, sister. Let's leave this place and go out into the wide world together. And so they ran away, walking through fields and meadows, over hedges and ditches, until the day was nearly gone. When the rain began to fall, Sister looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "Heaven and our hearts are weeping together." By evening, they reached a great forest. They were worn out from walking, weak with hunger and heavy with sorrow, and they crept into a hollow tree for shelter. There, pressed close together, they fell fast asleep. When they woke the next morning, the sun was already high, pouring warm light straight into their hiding place. Brother sat up, licking dry lips, and said, "I'm so thirsty, sister. If only I knew where to find a stream. I think I can hear water." He jumped down, took Sister's hand, and together they went searching for the sound. But what they did not know was this: their cruel stepmother was no ordinary woman. She was a witch. She had guessed the children would run, and she followed secretly through the forest, slipping behind trees and through shadows, and with wicked care she cast spells over every stream and brook in the woods. Before long, brother and sister found a small brook, dancing over stones, glittering as it ran. Brother rushed toward it, desperate to drink, but as the water hurried by, Sister heard a strange whisper rising from it, murmuring like a warning, woven into the current. "Who drinks of me will be a tiger. Who drinks of me will be a tiger." Sister grabbed brother's arm. "No," she cried. "Dear brother, please don't drink. You'll turn into a wild beast and tear me to pieces." Brother's throat burned with thirst, but he forced himself to pull back. "All right," he said, swallowing hard. "I'll wait for the next stream." They walked on deeper into the forest until they came to a second brook. Again, brother leaned down, and again, sister heard the water's voice, low and relentless. "Who drinks of me will be a wolf. Who drinks of me will be a wolf." Sister's heart jumped. "Brother, please don't drink here either. You'll become a wolf and eat me up." Brother clenched his fists. He was trembling from thirst now, but he stepped away. "Fine," he said. "I'll wait a little longer." But at the next stream, no matter what you say, I have to drink. I can't bear it anymore. And so they hurried on until they reached a third brook, clear and inviting as silver. Brother fell to his knees beside it. But as the water ran, Sister heard the same dreadful spell, softer than before, yet just as certain. "Who drinks of me will be a roe. Who drinks of me will be a roe." Sister pleaded, "Brother, don't drink. Please, you'll turn into a roe deer and run away from me." But Brother's thirst had become stronger than fear. He bent down, and the instant his lips touched the water, the spell struck. He collapsed onto the grass, and where her brother had been, a little roebuck lay trembling. Sister let out a cry that seemed to tear the forest open. She wept over him, and the little roe wept too, its dark eyes full of sorrow, pressing close to her side, as if it still understood her heart. At last, Sister wiped her tears and said, voice shaking but steady with love, "No, I will never leave you. Never." She took off her golden garter and tied it gently around the roebuck's neck. Then she gathered rushes and braided a soft cord, fastening it to the collar so she could keep her brother close. Hand in hand, no longer. Now it was girl and fawn walking together into the deep, quiet woods. After a long, long journey, they found a small house hidden among the trees. Sister peered inside. It was empty. The air was still. The rooms held nothing but silence and dust. And yet, to her, it felt like safety. "We can live here," she whispered. She made a bed for the little roe out of moss and leaves. Every morning and evening, she went out to gather roots, nuts, and berries for herself, and tender grass for her brother. The roebuck ate from her hand, played around her, and seemed at peace. At night, when Sister was tired, she prayed softly and rested her head against the fawn's back, using him as her pillow. And if brother had only kept his human form, it would have been the gentlest life imaginable. They lived this way for quite some time, until one day the king of that country rode into the forest with his hunters. Suddenly, the woods rang with horns, the baying of dogs and the shouts of men. The little roe lifted its head, ears twitching, and a wild longing stirred in it. "Oh, sister," the roe begged, "please let me go to the hunt. I can't stay still. When I hear it," he pleaded and pleaded until sister finally gave in. But she was afraid. "All right," she said, "but you must come back at evening. I'll lock the door because of those wild hunters." And so, "No, it's truly you. You must knock and say, 'My sister, dear open, I'm here.' If you don't say it, I won't open the door." The little roe sprang away light as wind thrilled by the open air. The king and his hunters soon spotted the beautiful creature with the golden collar and gave chase. But the roe was fast and clever. Whenever they thought they had it, it vanished into bushes and leapt away like a flicker of gold through green leaves. At nightfall, it returned home and knocked softly. "My sister, dear open, I'm here." The door opened. The roe slipped inside, and it rested on its soft moss bed. The next morning, the hunt began again. At the first sound of horns, the roe couldn't bear it. "Sister, open the door." "I have to go." Sister opened it and warned him again to return by nightfall and speak the words. And off the roe dashed. The hunters chased it all day, but as evening fell, they managed to surround it little by little, and one hunter wounded it lightly in the foot. The roe limped and fled slower now, and the hunter followed quietly, followed all the way to the hidden house. He heard the roe call, "My sister, dear open, I'm here." And he saw the door open and close quickly. The hunter remembered everything and rushed back to the king, telling him what he had seen. "Tomorrow we hunt again," the king said. That night, sister's hands shook as she washed the blood from her brother's fur. She bound the little wound with herbs and whispered, "Rest now. Let it heal." By morning, it was nearly well. But when the horns sounded again, the roe was restless. "I have to go," it begged. Sister burst into tears. "They'll kill you," she sobbed. "And then I'll be alone in the forest with no one. I won't let you go." "If you don't," the roe said, "I'll die of grief. When I hear the horns, it feels like my skin will jump off my bones." So sister, with a heavy heart, opened the door, and the roe darted out, healthy, joyful, and wild. When the king saw the roe again, he gave strict orders. Chase it until evening, he told his men, but do not hurt it. When the sun set, the king said, "Now take me to the little house in the woods." And when he stood before the door, he knocked and said, "My sister, dear, open. I'm here." The door opened, and the king stepped inside. There stood the most beautiful maiden he had ever seen. Sister froze, startled to see not her roebuck, but a man with a golden crown. Yet the king's eyes were gentle. He held out his hand and said, "Come with me to my castle. Be my wife." Sister's heart thudded. "Yes," she said, "but only if my roe can come too. I cannot leave him." The king promised he will stay with you as long as you live and will want for nothing. Just then, the roe came bounding in, and Sister tied the rush cord to the collar. Once more took the end in her hand, and together, the three of them left the forest. The king lifted the maiden onto his horse and carried her to the castle where the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. And the roe was loved, as well petted, protected, and allowed to roam freely through the palace gardens. Far away, the wicked stepmother believed the children were gone forever. Sister torn apart by beasts. Brother shot in the hunt. But when she heard the truth that Sister had become queen and lived happily, and that the enchanted roe lived safely beside her, envy and hatred burned so hot in her heart that she could think of nothing else but how to ruin them. Her own daughter, ugly as night, with only one eye, complained bitterly. "That should have been my luck," she hissed. "I should be the queen." "Be quiet," the witch snapped. "When the time comes, I'll be ready." And soon the time did come. One day, while the king was away, hunting, the queen gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. The old witch saw her chance. She disguised herself as a lady-in-waiting and hurried into the queen's room, calling out sweetly, "The bath is ready. It will make you strong again. Come quickly before the water gets cold." Her one-eyed daughter waited close by. Together, they carried the weak queen into the bath chamber. The door shut. The lock clicked. They had prepared a blazing fire beneath the bath so that the steam and heat would suffocate the queen. When they were sure she was dead, the witch placed a cap on her daughter's head and laid the girl in the queen's bed. With dark magic, she made the daughter's shape and appearance resemble the queen's, but she could not restore the missing eye. So she made the false queen lie with the blind side turned away. That evening, the king returned, overjoyed to hear of his son. He hurried toward the queen's room, only for the witch to stop him. "Careful," she warned. "Keep the curtains drawn. Don't let light into the queen's eyes. She must be perfectly quiet." And so the king obeyed, never realizing a stranger lay in his wife's bed. But when midnight came and the whole castle slept, the nurse who watched the baby's cradle saw the nursery door open softly, silently, and in stepped the real queen. She moved like mist, pale and quiet, but gentle as ever. She lifted her child, held him in her arms, and nursed him. Then she shook the pillows, laid him back down, and tucked him in with care. She went to the corner where the roe lay sleeping, stroked his back tenderly, and then disappeared without a word. The next morning, the nurse questioned the guards. Had anyone entered the castle? Had anyone passed through the gates? "No," they said. "We saw no one." Night after night, the queen returned in the same way, silent, caring for her child, comforting the roe, then vanishing again. The nurse was terrified, too frightened to speak. At last, one night, the queen spoke her voice, barely more than air. "Is my child well? Is my roe well? I'll come back twice, and then farewell." The nurse could not answer. She could only tremble. But when the queen left, the nurse ran to the king and told him everything. "Good heavens," the king whispered. "Tonight I will watch myself." That night he hid in the nursery. At midnight, the queen appeared again and said, "Is my child well? Is my roe well? I'll come back once, and then farewell." She nursed the baby and soothed the roe just as before. The king could hardly breathe. He dared not speak. The next night, he watched again. At midnight, the queen came, and this time she said, "Is my child well? Is my roe well? I've come this once, and now farewell." And then the king could hold back no longer. He sprang forward and cried, "You can be no one but my dear wife." "Yes," she answered, "I am your dear wife." And in that very moment, she was restored to life, fresh, warm, rosy, and whole, as though death itself had been broken like a thread. The queen told the king everything: the witch's deception, the suffocating bath, the false queen in the bed. The king's face turned to stone with rage. He had the witch and her daughter arrested at once and brought to trial. They were condemned to death. The daughter was led into the forest where wild beasts tore her apart, and the old witch was burned at the stake. And when the witch was reduced to ashes, her spell shattered. The little roe transformed back into a human boy. Brother and sister, reunited at last, lived together in peace and joy, safe from harm, surrounded by love, and they lived happily ever after. Princess Rosette. Once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen who had 2 handsome sons and 1 little daughter. The baby girl was so lovely that no one who laid eyes on her could help but love her at once. When it came time for the princess's christening, the queen did what she always did. She invited all the fairies in the realm to attend the ceremony, and afterward she treated them to a magnificent banquet. When the feast was finished, and the fairies prepared to leave the queen, as politely as she could, asked them, "Before you go, do not forget your usual good custom. Tell me what is going to happen to my daughter. Tell me what fate holds for Rosette." For Rosette was the name they had given the princess. The fairies exchanged uneasy glances and said they had left their book of magic at home, but they would return another day to tell her. The queen's heart sank. "Ah," she said, "I know what that means. You have nothing good to say. But I beg you, do not hide anything from me." And after much urging, the fairies finally confessed, "Madame, we fear Rosette may one day be the cause of great misfortunes to her brothers. They may even meet their death because of her. That is all we have been able to foresee. We are very sorry. We have nothing better to tell you." Then they left the palace, and the queen was so overcome with sadness that the king noticed at once. He asked what was troubling her, but the queen, frightened to speak of such a prophecy aloud, tried to hide the truth. She told him she had sat too close to the fire and burned the flax on her distaff. "Oh, is that all the king said?" And he went up to the garret and came back carrying more flax than she could spin in 100 years. Still, the queen looked sorrowful. He asked again, and she claimed she had been walking by the river and dropped one of her green satin slippers into the water. Oh, if that's all the king said. And he sent for every shoemaker in the kingdom, and soon the queen had 10,000 green satin slippers. Yet her face remained clouded. When the king pressed her a 3rd time, the queen said she had swallowed her wedding ring while eating porridge too quickly. But the king knew this was impossible because her ring was safely in his own purse. He held it up and said, "You are not telling me the truth. I have your ring right here." Ashamed and frightened, the queen finally confessed everything. The fairy's warning, the shadow hanging over their sons, the terrible fear that their daughter's very existence might bring disaster. She begged the king to think of some way to prevent it. Now, it was the king who fell silent and grim. After a long while, he said, heavy with dread, "I see no way to save our sons except to have Rosette's head cut off while she is still little." The queen cried out as if struck. She swore she would rather die herself than allow a hair on Rosette's head to be harmed. "Think of something else," she pleaded. "I will never agree to such a thing." They thought and argued and despaired until the queen heard of an old hermit who lived deep in a great forest near the castle inside the hollow of a tree. People traveled from far away to ask his counsel. And the queen said, "I must go to him. Perhaps he will know how to prevent what the fairies foretold." Before dawn the next morning, she set out on a little white mule, shod with solid gold, with 2 ladies riding behind her. When they reached the forest, the trees grew so thick that they had to dismount and walk. At last, they found the hollow tree and the hermit inside. He did not like visits, especially from ladies, and at first he was irritated. But when he recognized the queen, he bowed and said, "You are welcome, Majesty. What do you come to ask of me?" The queen told him the prophecy and her fear, and asked what she must do. The hermit listened, then answered simply, "Shut the princess in a tower and never let her leave it." The queen thanked him, rewarded him generously, and hurried back to the castle. When the king heard the advice, he ordered a great tower built as quickly as possible. And there to protect her brothers, little Rosette was shut away. Yet the king and queen did not abandon her to loneliness. They and Rosette's 2 brothers visited her every day so she would not grow dull. The eldest was called the Great Prince, the younger the Little Prince. They loved their sister dearly, for Rosette was the sweetest, prettiest princess anyone had ever seen, and even her smallest smile seemed worth more than 100 pieces of gold. When Rosette turned 15, the Great Prince asked the king if it might soon be time for his sister to marry. The little prince asked the queen the same question. Their parents laughed at the thought and answered nothing. And then, not long after, the king and queen fell ill, and on the very same day they died. The whole kingdom mourned. The bells rang in grief, and Rosette wept more bitterly than anyone. After the funeral, the dukes and counselors placed the great prince on a golden throne, crowned him with a diamond crown, and shouted, "Long live the king!" Then the mourning turned to celebration, and the city filled with feasting and rejoicing for their new ruler. When the noise quieted, the new king and his brother spoke together and said, "Now that we are the masters, we must take our sister out of that dull tower. She has suffered enough." They crossed the garden to the corner where the tower rose high and lonely. Rosette sat inside working on embroidery. The moment she saw her brothers, she leapt up, took the king's hand, and begged, "Good morning, dear brother. Now that you are king, please take me out of this tower. I'm so tired of it." And she began to cry. The king kissed her cheeks and gently wiped her tears. "That's exactly why we've come," he promised. "We're taking you out today. You'll live with us in the castle." The little prince grinned and showed her a pocket full of sugar plums he had brought. "Hurry," he said. "Let's get out of this ugly tower. The king will arrange a grand marriage for you before you know it." Rosette stepped outside and froze. Before her stretched a garden full of fruit trees and flowers, green grass, like velvet fountains flashing in the sun. She had never seen anything like it in her entire life. Amazed, she ran here and there, gathering fruit and blossoms, as if she'd discovered the world for the first time. And trotting ahead of her was her little dog, Frisk, bright green from head to tail, with only one ear, barking and tumbling head over heels in the most delightful way. Everyone laughed at Frisk's tricks, but suddenly he darted into a small wood at the edge of the garden. Rosette chased after him, and then she stopped, stunned with wonder. In a patch of sunshine stood a peacock, its tail spread wide like a jeweled fan. Rosette stared as if enchanted. She could hardly breathe. When her brothers caught up, they asked what had captured her attention so completely. She pointed wide-eyed and asked what the creature was. A bird, they told her. One that people sometimes eat. Rosette gasped. "Eat it? You mean people dare kill something so beautiful and eat it?" Then she lifted her chin and declared, "Except the king of the peacocks, and when I am queen, I will make sure no one ever eats any of my subjects." The king stared at her in astonishment. "Little sister," he said, "where are we supposed to find a king of the peacocks?" "Oh, wherever you like," Rosette answered, perfectly serious. "But I will marry no one else." And Rosette meant it. They brought her to the castle, and to keep her happy, they had the peacock brought too, and told to walk along the terrace outside her windows, so she could watch it whenever she wished. Ladies of the court came to meet the princess and showered her with gifts, dresses, ribbons, sweets, diamonds, pearls, dolls, embroidered slippers. Rosette thanked each person so graciously and sweetly that everyone left charmed. Meanwhile, the king and the little prince sat together, troubled. Was there truly such a person as a king of the peacocks? And if so, where could he be found? They decided their best chance was to travel the world and ask. First, they had a portrait painted of Rosette, so lifelike it seemed it might speak. Then they told her, "Since you will marry no one but the king of the peacocks, we will go out together into the wide world and search for him. If we find him, we'll be glad. Until we return, take care of the kingdom." Rosette thanked them warmly and promised she would wisely amuse herself by watching her peacock and make Frisk dance while they were gone. So the two brothers set out and questioned everyone they met. "Do you know the king of the peacocks?" But the answer was always the same. No. No, they traveled farther than anyone could imagine, farther than anyone had ever traveled, until at last they reached the kingdom of the cockchafers. There were so many cockchafers buzzing that the noise nearly made the king's head ache. He asked the grandest-looking cockchafer he could find if he knew where the king of the peacocks lived. "Sire," the cockchafer replied, "his kingdom is 30,000 leagues from here. You have already come a long way." "And how do you know that?" the king asked. "Oh," the cockchafer said proudly, "we know you well. We spend 2 or 3 months in your garden every year." They became great friends at once. They dined together, and the cockchafer showed them the marvels of his strange land, where the tiniest green leaf cost a gold coin or more. Then the brothers continued their journey, and because they now had directions, they reached their destination much faster. Soon they knew they were near, because peacocks filled every tree, and their cries rang through the air. When they arrived in the city, they found men and women dressed entirely in peacock feathers, as if nothing could be more splendid. And then they saw him, the king of the peacocks, himself, riding in a small golden carriage, sparkling with diamonds, pulled at full speed by 12 peacocks. He was as handsome as could be pale and noble, with curly golden hair and a crown made of peacock feathers. He noticed at once that the brothers were strangers and summoned them. When they stood before him and bowed, they said, "Sire, we have come from very far away to show you a beautiful portrait." They drew out Rosette's picture. The king of the peacocks stared at it for a long time. At last, he said softly, "I would not have believed such a beautiful princess existed. She is 100 times more beautiful than that the brothers promised." The king's expression sharpened. "I think you are making fun of me, sire." The little prince said, "My brother is a king like you. He is called the king. I am the prince. That portrait is our sister, Princess Rosette. We have come to ask if you would marry her. She is as good as she is beautiful, and we will give her a bushel of gold pieces as her dowry." "With all my heart," the king of the peacocks replied. "I will make her happy. She will have whatever she desires, and I will love her dearly." Then his voice turned cold. "But I warn you, if she is not as beautiful as you say, I will have your heads cut off." The brothers did not hesitate. "We agree," they said together. "Very well," said the king of the peacocks. "Off to prison with you until the princess arrives." The brothers went without a complaint, because they were certain Rosette was far more beautiful than her portrait. They were treated kindly, and the king visited them often, so they would not feel dull. Meanwhile, Rosette's portrait hung in the palace, and the king of the peacocks did nothing but gaze at it day and night, growing more impatient with every hour. From prison, the brothers sent a letter to Rosette, telling her to pack her treasures quickly and travel at once, because the king of the peacocks was ready to marry her. They did not tell her they were imprisoned, because they did not want her frightened. When Rosette received the letter, she ran through the castle with joy, announcing that the king of the peacocks had been found, and she would marry him. Cannons fired. Fireworks burst in the sky. People ate cakes and sweets until they could eat no more. For 3 days, Everyone who came to visit Rosette was given a slice of bread and jam, a nightingale's egg, and a cup of hippocras. When the celebration ended, Rosette gave away her dolls to friends and handed her kingdom over to the wisest old men in the city, instructing them to guard the money carefully until her brothers returned, and above all, never forget to feed her peacock. Then she set out with only her nurse, the nurse's daughter, and little green Frisk. They boarded a boat and sailed out to sea, carrying the bushel of gold and enough dresses to last 10 years, even if Rosette wore 2 each day. They laughed and sang as the shore faded behind them. As they traveled, the nurse kept speaking in a sing-song way to the boatman. "Can you take us? Can you take us to the kingdom of the peacocks?" And he would answer, "Oh no, oh no." Then she'd press, "You must take us. You must take us." And he'd reply, "Very soon, very soon." Then she'd ask again, "Will you take us? Will you take us?" And he'd say, "Yes, yes." At last, when no one could hear, the nurse leaned close and whispered in his ear, "Do you want to make your fortune?" The boatman's eyes widened. "Of course I do. I can tell you how to get a bag of gold," she murmured. "I want nothing better," he said quickly. The nurse's voice became cruel as a blade. "Tonight, when the princess is asleep, help me throw her into the sea. When she's drowned, I'll dress my daughter in the princess's clothes and jewels, and we'll take her to the king of the peacocks. He'll marry her, and you, your reward, will be a boat full of diamonds." The boatman recoiled. "But what a pity to drown such a pretty princess. Yet greed is a poison that spreads fast." The nurse argued, coaxed, and promised, until at last the boatman agreed. That night, Rosette slept, as she always did, with Frisk curled at the foot of her bed on his little cushion. The wicked nurse crept in, bringing the boatman and her daughter. Together, they lifted Rosette, not even bothering to wake her, and they did not stop at the princess alone. They took the feather bed, the mattress, the pillows, the blankets, everything, and threw it all into the sea. But fate had hidden a miracle inside Rosette's bed. It was stuffed with phoenix feathers, rare feathers that could never sink. And so the bed floated on the water like a boat, carrying Rosette safely across the waves. After a while, the cold seeped into her bones. The bed rocked, turning and shifting, and at last it woke Frisk. His nose twitched. He smelled fish close by soles and herrings brushing the water, and he began to bark. He barked so loudly and so long that the fish all around them stirred and swam closer, bumping the floating bed with their great heads. Half asleep, Rosette sighed to herself. How our boat rocks tonight. I'm glad I'm not uncomfortable like this very often. Far away, the nurse and the boatman heard the barking and sneered. That nasty little animal and his mistress are drinking seawater now, they said. We must be near the city. Let's hurry to land. The king of the peacocks had sent a magnificent escort to welcome his bride. 100 carriages drawn by strange animals, lions, bears, wolves, stags, horses, buffalo eagles, and peacocks. Rosette's carriage was the most extraordinary of all, drawn by 6 blue monkeys who could tumble dance on ropes and perform charming tricks. Their harnesses were crimson velvet with golden buckles. Behind the carriage walked 60 beautiful ladies, chosen to serve and entertain Rosette. The nurse had dressed her daughter in Rosette's finest gown and covered her in diamonds from head to toe. But nothing could hide the truth. She was ugly enough to frighten anyone. And even worse, she was sulky and foul-tempered, complaining and snapping at everyone. When the false princess stepped off the boat and the escort saw her, they were so shocked they couldn't speak. The impostor glared at them. "Well, move," she shouted. "If you don't bring me something to eat, I'll have all your heads cut off." The escort whispered among themselves in horror. What a disaster. She's as wicked as she is ugly. What a bride for our poor king. Surely she wasn't worth fetching from the end of the world. But the false bride marched on, slapping and pinching servants for no reason at all. As the procession moved slowly toward the palace, peacocks perched in trees, ready to salute their new queen. They had intended to cry, "Long live our beautiful queen." But the moment they saw her, they couldn't help shrieking. Instead, "Oh, how ugly she is! Oh, how ugly she is!" The impostor's face twisted with rage. "Kill those insolent peacocks," she demanded. But the peacocks only flew away laughing. Watching the chaos, the boatman leaned close to the nurse. "This is bad gossip," he muttered. "Your daughter should have been prettier." "Be quiet, idiot," the nurse hissed. "You'll ruin everything." Soon word reached the king of the peacocks the princess had arrived. He asked eagerly, "Is she as beautiful as her portrait? Is she even prettier?" His courtiers hesitated. "Sire," they said carefully, "if she were as pretty as the portrait, that would be quite enough." "That's true," the king said. "If she is, I'll be satisfied. Come, we'll meet her." He heard shouting and thought people were yelling about some strange dwarf traveling with the princess. It never crossed his mind they were talking about the bride herself. At the head of the procession, Rosette's portrait was carried proudly. Behind it walked the king of the peacocks, surrounded by courtiers. He was trembling with anticipation until he saw the false princess. He stopped dead. His face burned with fury. "What is this?" he cried. "Have those two prisoners dared mock me like this? Do they think I'll marry that hideous creature? Take her, lock her in my great tower with her nurse and everyone who brought her. And as for those two impostors, I will have their heads cut off." In the prison, the king and the prince had been certain their sister had arrived. They dressed themselves neatly and waited to be summoned. Instead, guards arrived, seized them, and dragged them down to a black dungeon filled with bats and toads, where icy water rose up to their necks. "This is a miserable sort of wedding," they whispered. "What has happened? They mean to kill us." 3 days passed before they heard any news. Then the king of the peacocks berated them through a hole in the wall, calling them beggars and impostors and threatening execution. The brothers insisted they had spoken the truth. Rosette was more beautiful than day itself, and something mysterious must have happened. They demanded 7 days to prove their innocence. The king of the peacocks hardly wanted to grant it, but at last he agreed. Now, while all of this happened at court, what had become of the real Princess Rosette? When daylight came, Rosette woke and found herself floating on the open sea with no boat, no crew, no shore in sight, only her bed riding the waves like a strange raft. She cried until even the fish seemed sorry for her. She sobbed, "The king of the peacocks must have ordered me thrown into the sea. He must have changed his mind and decided he doesn't want to marry me. How strange, because I would have loved him so much. We could have been so happy." And she wept even harder, because in her heart she still loved him. For 2 days, Rosette and Frisk floated soaked and shivering with hunger. When Rosette spotted oysters, She forced herself and Frisk to eat them, though they disliked them. At night, she trembled and told Frisk, "Please keep barking so the souls don't come and eat us." By chance, they drifted close to shore, near the cottage of a poor old man who lived alone. When he heard a dog barking out at sea, he thought, there must have been a shipwreck, for no dogs ever passed there by accident. He hurried out and saw Rosette and Frisk floating on the bed. Rosette stretched out her hands and cried, "Good old man, save me, or I'll die of cold and hunger." He pitied her at once. He ran inside, grabbed a long boat hook, waded into the water up to his chin, nearly drowning once or twice, and at last managed to catch the bed and drag it onto land. Rosette and Frisk were overjoyed to feel dry ground beneath them. Rosette thanked him again and again. Wrapped in blankets, she walked barefoot into his cottage. The old man lit a straw fire and brought out clothes that had once belonged to his wife, simple dress and shoes. Rosette put them on, and even dressed so plainly, she looked as charming as ever. Frisk danced his best to cheer her. The old man, seeing her satin and gold bed coverings, knew she must be someone great. He begged her to trust him and tell her story. Rosette told him everything, crying bitterly again. At the thought, she believed the king had ordered her drowning. The old man asked what they should do. "I have nothing but black bread and radishes," he said. "Shall I tell the king of the peacocks you're here? If he sees you, he'll surely want to marry you." "Oh no," Rosette cried. "He must be wicked if he tried to drown me." "Don't tell him. But if you have a basket, give it to me." The old man gave her a basket. Rosette tied it around Frisk's neck and whispered, "Go into town and find the best cooking pot. Bring me what's inside." Frisk scampered away, and since there was no better kitchen in town than the king's own, the clever little dog slipped in, lifted the lid, and brought the royal dinner back in his basket. Rosette smiled through her tears. Now she told Frisk, "Go back to the pantry and bring me the best of everything you find." Frisk returned with white bread, red wine, and sweetmeats until the basket was nearly too heavy. That day, when the king of the peacocks called for his meal, the pot was empty and the pantry was bare. The courtiers stared in panic. The king grew furious. "If there is no dinner, I cannot dine," he snapped. "Roast plenty for supper." That evening, Rosette sent Frisk again. "Find the best kitchen," she said, "and bring me the finest morsels on the spit." Frisk knew exactly where to go. he slipped into the palace kitchen, and when the cook turned away, he stole everything roasted perfectly on the spit and carried it to Rosette. Then he returned for the tarts and sugar plums prepared for the king's supper. That night, the king, starving from no dinner, demanded supper early and discovered everything was gone. He went to bed half-starved and in a terrible temper. The same thing happened the next day and the next. For 3 days, the king of the peacocks received no food at all, because each meal vanished at the very moment it was ready. At last, the prime minister feared the king might starve to death. He hid in a dark corner of the kitchen and watched the pot without blinking, and then he saw it, a little green dog with one ear slipping into the room, lifting the lid, transferring all the food into a basket, and running away. The prime minister followed, tracking the dog through town to the old man's cottage. He rushed back to the king with the news. The king, astonished, decided to see for himself. He went with the prime minister and archers and arrived just in time to catch Rosette and the old man finishing the king's stolen dinner. The king ordered them seized and bound with ropes. Frisk, too. Back at the palace, the king was told today is the final day of the 7-day respite granted to the 2 impostors. Excellent, the king said coldly. Then those 2 prisoners will have their heads cut off at the same time as these thieves who stole my dinners. The old man fell to his knees and begged for time to explain. As he spoke, the king of the peacocks looked closely at Rosette, for the first time moved by her tears. Then he heard the old man say her name, Rosette, and that she had been treacherously thrown into the sea. In an instant, the king's face changed. Though he was weak from hunger, he turned head over heels 3 times without stopping, then ran to Rosette, embraced her, and untied her ropes with his own hands. I love you with all my heart, he declared. Messengers were sent to bring the brothers out of the dungeon. The king and prince arrived pale and shaken, believing they were walking toward their execution. The nurse, her daughter, and the boatman were brought in as well. Rosette ran to her brothers and held them tightly. The traitors threw themselves at her feet, begging forgiveness. And Rosette, so good-hearted, was so happy to be reunited that she forgave them freely. The king agreed. The old man was splendidly rewarded and spent the rest of his days in the palace. The king of the peacocks apologized deeply to Rosette's brothers and made amends for their cruel treatment. The nurse returned Rosette's dresses, jewels, and the bushel of gold pieces. And the wedding was celebrated at once, with joy so bright it seemed to wash away every dark hour that came before, and they all lived happily ever after, especially Frisk, who enjoyed the finest luxury for the rest of his life, and never ate anything worse than a partridge wing for dinner again. The Enchanted Pig. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 3 daughters. Now it happened that he had to go out to battle. So he called his daughters and said to them, "My dear children, I am obliged to go to the wars. The enemy is approaching us with a large army. It is a great grief to me to leave you all. During my absence, take care of yourselves and be good girls. Behave well and look after everything in the house. You may walk in the garden, and you may go into all the rooms in the palace except the room at the back in the right-hand corner. Into that you must not enter, for harm would befall you." "You may keep your mind easy, Father," they replied. "We have never been disobedient to you. Go in peace, and may heaven give you a glorious victory." When everything was ready for his departure, the king gave them the keys of all the rooms and reminded them once more of what he had said. His daughters kissed his hands with tears in their eyes and wished him prosperity, and he gave the eldest the keys. Now, when the girls found themselves alone, they felt so sad and dull that they did not know what to do. So, to pass the time, they decided to work for part of the day, to read for part of the day, and to enjoy themselves in the garden for part of the day. As long as they did, this all went well with them. But this happy state of things did not last long. Every day, they grew more and more curious, and you will see what the end of that was. "Sisters," said the eldest princess, "all day long we sew, spin, and read. We have been several days quite alone, and there is no corner of the garden that we have not explored. We have been in all the rooms of our father's palace, and have admired the rich and beautiful furniture. Why should not we go into the room that our father forbade us to enter?" "Sister," said the youngest, "I cannot think how you can tempt us to break our father's command. When he told us not to go into that room, he must have known what he was saying, and have had a good reason for saying it. Surely the sky won't fall about our heads if we do go in," said the second princess. "Dragons and such like monsters that would devour us will not be hidden in the room. And how will our father ever find out that we have gone in?" While they were speaking, Thus encouraging each other, they had reached the room. The eldest fitted the key into the lock, and snap, the door stood open. The three girls entered. And what do you think they saw? The room was quite empty, and without any ornament. But in the middle stood a large table with a gorgeous cloth, and on it lay a big open book. Now the princesses were curious to know what was written in the book, especially the eldest. And this is what she read. The eldest daughter of this king will marry a prince from the east. Then the second girl stepped forward, and turning over the page, she read, the second daughter of this king will marry a prince from the west. The girls were delighted and laughed and teased each other. But the youngest princess did not want to go near the table or to open the book. Her elder sisters, however, left her no peace, and will she nill she, they dragged her up to the table, and in fear and trembling, she turned over the page and read, the youngest daughter of this king will be married to a pig from the north. Now, if a thunderbolt had fallen upon her from heaven, it would not have frightened her more. She almost died of misery, and if her sisters had not held her up, she would have sunk to the ground and cut her head open. When she came out of the fainting fit into which she had fallen in her terror, her sisters tried to comfort her, saying, "How can you believe such nonsense? When did it ever happen that a king's daughter married a pig? What a baby you are," said the other sister. "Has not our father enough soldiers to protect you, even if the disgusting creature did come to woo you?" The youngest princess would fain have let herself be convinced by her sister's words and have believed what they said, but her heart was heavy. Her thoughts kept turning to the book in which stood written that great happiness waited her sisters, but that a fate was in store for her, such as had never before been known in the world. Besides, the thought weighed on her heart that she had been guilty of disobeying her father. She began to get quite ill, and in a few days she was so changed that it was difficult to recognize her. Formerly, she had been rosy and merry. Now she was pale, and nothing gave her any pleasure. She gave up playing with her sisters in the garden, ceased to gather flowers to put in her hair, and never sang when they sat together at their spinning and sewing. In the meantime, the king won a great victory, and having completely defeated and driven off the enemy, he hurried home to his daughters, to whom his thoughts had constantly turned. Everyone went out to meet him with cymbals and fifes and drums, and there was great rejoicing over his victorious return. The king's first act on reaching home was to thank heaven for the victory he had gained over the enemies who had risen against him. He then entered his palace, and the 3 princesses stepped forward to meet him. His joy was great when he saw that they were all well, for the youngest did her best not to appear sad. In spite of this, however, it was not long before the king noticed that his 3rd daughter was getting very thin and sad-looking. And all of a sudden, he felt as if a hot iron were entering his soul, for it flashed through his mind that she had disobeyed his word. He felt sure he was right, but to be quite certain, he called his daughters to him, questioned them, and ordered them to speak the truth. They confessed everything, but took good care not to say which had led the other 2 into temptation. The king was so distressed when he heard it that he was almost overcome by grief. But he took heart and tried to comfort his daughters, who looked frightened to death. He saw that what had happened, and that 1,000 words would not alter matters by a hair's breadth. Well, these events had almost been forgotten when one fine day a prince from the east appeared at the court and asked the king for the hand of his eldest daughter. The king gladly gave his consent. A great wedding banquet was prepared, and after 3 days of feasting, the happy pair were accompanied to the frontier with much ceremony and rejoicing. After some time, the same thing befell the 2nd daughter, who was wooed and won by a prince from the west. Now, when the young princess saw that everything fell out exactly as had been written in the book, she grew very sad. She refused to eat and would not put on her fine clothes nor go out walking, and declared that she would rather die than become a laughing-stock to the world. But the king would not allow her to do anything so wrong, and he comforted her in all possible ways. So the time passed, till lo and behold, one fine day, an enormous pig from the north walked into the palace, and going straight up to the king said, "Hail, O king! May your life be as prosperous and bright as sunrise on a clear day." "I am glad to see you, well, friend," answered the king. "But what wind has brought you hither?" "I come a-wooing," replied the pig. Now the king was astonished to hear so fine a speech from a pig, and at once it occurred to him that something strange was the matter. He would gladly have turned the pig's thoughts in another direction, as he did not wish to give him the princess for a wife. But when he heard that the court and the whole street were full of all the pigs in the world, he saw that there was no escape, and that he must give his consent. The pig was not satisfied with mere promises, but insisted that the wedding should take place within a week and would not go away till the king had sworn a royal oath upon it. The king then sent for his daughter and advised her to submit to fate, as there was nothing else to be done. And he added, "My child, the words and whole behavior of this pig are quite unlike those of other pigs. I do not myself believe that he always was a pig. Depend upon it, some magic or witchcraft has been at work. Obey him and do everything that he wishes, and I feel sure that heaven will shortly send you release. If you wish me to do this, dear father, I will do it," replied the girl. In the meantime, the wedding day drew near. After the marriage, the pig and his bride set out for his home in one of the royal carriages. On the way, they passed a great bog, and the pig ordered the carriage to stop and got out and rolled about in the mire till he was covered with mud from head to foot. Then he got back into the carriage and told his wife to kiss him. What was the poor girl to do? She bethought herself of her father's words, and pulling out her pocket handkerchief, she gently wiped the pig's snout and kissed it. By the time they reached the pig's dwelling, which stood in a thick wood, it was quite dark. They sat down quietly for a little, as they were tired after their drive. Then they had supper together and lay down to rest. During the night, the princess noticed that the pig had changed into a man. She was not a little surprised, but remembering her father's words, she took courage, determined to wait and see what would happen. And now she noticed that every night the pig became a man, and every morning he was changed into a pig before she awoke. This happened several nights running, and the princess could not understand it at all. Clearly, her husband must be bewitched. In time, she grew quite fond of him. He was so kind and gentle. One fine day, as she was sitting alone, she saw an old witch go past. She felt quite excited, as it was so long since she had seen a human being, and she called out to the old woman to come and talk to her. Among other things, the witch told her that she understood all magic arts, and that she could foretell the future and knew the healing powers of herbs and plants. "I shall be grateful to you all my life, old dame," said the princess, "if you will tell me what is the matter with my husband. Why is he a pig by day and a human being by night?" "I was just going to tell you that one thing, my dear, to show you what a good fortune teller I am. If you like, I will give you a herb to break the spell, if you will only give it to me," said the princess. "I will give you anything you choose to ask for I cannot bear to see him in this state." "Here then, my dear child," said the witch, "take this thread, but do not let him know about it, for if he did, it would lose its healing power. At night, when he is asleep, you must get up very quietly and fasten the thread round his left foot as firmly as possible. And you will see in the morning he will not have changed back into a pig, but will still be a man. I do not want any reward. I shall be sufficiently repaid by knowing that you are happy. It almost breaks my heart to think of all you have suffered, and I only wish I had known it sooner, as I should have come to your rescue at once." When the old witch had gone away, the princess hid the thread very carefully, and at night she got up quietly, and with a beating heart she bound the thread round her husband's foot. Just as she was pulling the knot tight, there was a crack, and the thread broke, for it was rotten. Her husband awoke with a start and said to her, "Unhappy woman, what have you done? 3 days more, and this unholy spell would have fallen from me, and now who knows how long I may have to go about in this disgusting shape. I must leave you at once, and we shall not meet again until you have worn out 3 pairs of iron shoes and blunted a steel staff in your search for me." So saying, he disappeared. Now when the princess was left alone, she began to weep and moan in a way that was pitiful to hear. But when she saw that her tears and groans did her no good, she got up, determined to go wherever fate should lead her. On reaching a town, the first thing she did was to order 3 pairs of iron sandals and a steel staff, and having made these preparations for her journey, she set out in search of her husband. On and on she wandered over 9 seas and across 9 continents, through forests with trees whose stems were as thick as beer barrels, stumbling and knocking herself against the fallen branches, then picking herself up and going on. The boughs of the trees hit her face, and the shrubs tore her hands. But on she went, and never looked back. At last, wearied with her long journey, and worn out, and overcome with sorrow, but still with hope, at her heart she reached a house. Now who do you think lived there? The moon. The princess knocked at the door, and begged to be let in, that she might rest a little. The mother of the moon, when she saw her sad plight, felt a great pity for her, and took her in and nursed and tended her. And while she was here, the princess had a little baby. One day, the mother of the moon asked her, "How was it possible for you, a mortal, to get hither to the house of the moon?" Then the poor princess told her all that happened to her, and added, "I shall always be thankful to heaven for leading me hither, and grateful to you that you took pity on me and on my baby, and did not leave us to die. Now I beg one last favor of you. Can your daughter, the moon, tell me where my husband is?" "She cannot tell you that, my child," replied the goddess. "But if you will travel towards the east until you reach the dwelling of the sun, he may be able to tell you something." Then she gave the princess a roast chicken to eat, and warned her to be very careful not to lose any of the bones, because they might be of great use to her. When the princess had thanked her once more for her hospitality and for her good advice, and had thrown away one pair of shoes that were worn out, and had put on a second pair, she tied up the chicken bones in a bundle, and taking her baby in her arms and her staff in her hand, she set out once more on her wanderings. On and on and on she went across bare sandy deserts, where the roads were so heavy that for every 2 steps that she took forwards, she fell back one. But she struggled on till she had passed these dreary plains. Next, she crossed high, rocky mountains, jumping from crag to crag and from peak to peak. Sometimes she would rest for a little on a mountain and then start afresh, always farther and farther on. She had to cross swamps and to soil mountain peaks covered with flints, so that her feet and knees and elbows were all torn and bleeding. And sometimes she came to a precipice across which she could not jump, and she had to crawl round on hands and knees, helping herself along with her staff. At length, wearied to death, she reached the palace in which the sun lived. She knocked and begged for admission. The mother of the sun opened the door and was astonished at beholding a mortal from the distant earthly shores, and wept with pity when she heard of all she had suffered. Then, having promised to ask her son about the princess's husband, she hid her in the cellar, so that the son might notice nothing on his return home, for he was always in a bad temper when he came in at night. The next day, The princess feared that things would not go well with her, for the sun had noticed that someone from the other world had been in the palace. But his mother had soothed him with soft words, assuring him that this was not so. So the princess took heart when she saw how kindly she was treated, and asked, "But how in the world is it possible for the sun to be angry? He is so beautiful and so good to mortals." "This is how it happens," replied the sun's mother. "In the morning, when he stands at the gates of paradise, he is happy and smiles on the whole world. But during the day he gets cross, because he sees all the evil deeds of men, and that is why his heat becomes so scorching. But in the evening he is both sad and angry, for he stands at the gates of death. That is his usual course. From there, he comes back here." She then told the princess that she had asked about her husband, but that her son had replied that he knew nothing about him, and that her only hope was to go and inquire of the wind. Before the princess left, the mother of the sun gave her a roast chicken to eat, and advised her to take great care of the bones, which she did, wrapping them up in a bundle. She then threw away her second pair of shoes, which were quite worn out, and with her child on her arm and her staff in her hand, she set forth on her way to the wind. In these wanderings, she met with even greater difficulties than before, for she came upon one mountain of flints after another, out of which tongues of fire would flame up. She passed through woods which had never been trodden by human foot, and had to cross fields of ice and avalanches of snow. The poor woman nearly died of these hardships, but she kept a brave heart, and at length she reached an enormous cave in the side of a mountain. This was where the wind lived. There was a little door in the railing in front of the cave, and here the princess knocked and begged for admission. The mother of the wind had pity on her and took her in that she might rest a little. Here, too, she was hidden away so that the wind might not notice her. The next morning, the mother of the wind told her that her husband was living in a thick wood, so thick that no axe had been able to cut a way through it. Here he had built himself a sort of house by placing trunks of trees together and fastening them with withes. And here he lived alone, shunning humankind. After the mother of the wind had given the princess a chicken to eat, and had warned her to take care of the bones, she advised her to go by the Milky Way, which at night lies across the sky, and to wander on till she reached her goal. Having thanked the old woman with tears in her eyes for her hospitality and for the good news she had given her, the princess set out on her journey and rested neither night nor day. So great was her longing to see her husband again. On and on she walked until her last pair of shoes fell in pieces. So she threw them away and went on with bare feet, not heeding the bogs, nor the thorns that wounded her, nor the stones that bruised her. At last she reached a beautiful green meadow on the edge of a wood. Her heart was cheered by the sight of the flowers and the soft, cool grass, and she sat down and rested for a little. But hearing the birds chirping to their mates among the trees made her think with longing of her husband, and she wept bitterly, and taking her child in her arms and her bundle of chicken bones on her shoulder, she entered the wood. For 3 days and 3 nights she struggled through it, but could find nothing. She was quite worn out with weariness and hunger, and even her staff was no further help to her, for in her many wanderings it had become quite blunted. She almost gave up in despair, but made one last great effort. And suddenly, in a thicket, she came upon the sort of house that the mother of the wind had described. It had no windows, and the door was up in the roof. Round the house she went in search of steps, but could find none. What was she to do? How was she to get in? She thought and thought, and tried in vain to climb up to the door. Then, suddenly, she bethought her of the chicken bones that she had dragged all that weary way, and she said to herself, "They would not all have told me to take such good care of these bones, if they had not had some good reason for doing so. Perhaps now, in my hour of need, they may be of use to me." So she took the bones out of her bundle, and having thought for a moment, she placed the 2 ends together. To her surprise, they stuck tight. Then she added the other bones till she had 2 long poles the height of the house. These she placed against the wall at a distance of 1 yard from one another. Across them she placed the other bones piece by piece, like the steps of a ladder. As soon as one step was finished, she stood upon it, and made the next one, and then the next, till she was close to the door. But just as she got near the top, she noticed that there were no bones left for the last rung of the ladder. What was she to do? Without that last step, the whole ladder was useless. She must have lost one of the bones. Then, suddenly, an idea came to her. Taking a knife, she chopped off her little finger, and placing it on the last step, it stuck, as the bones had done. The ladder was complete, and with her child on her arm, she entered the door of the house. Here she found everything in perfect order. Having taken some food, she laid the child down to sleep in a trough that was on the floor and sat down herself to rest. When her husband, the pig, came back to his house, he was startled by what he saw. At first, he could not believe his eyes and stared at the ladder of bones and at the little finger on the top of it. He felt that some fresh magic must be at work, and in his terror, he almost turned away from the house. But then a better idea came to him, and he changed himself into a dove, so that no witchcraft could have power over him, and flew into the room without touching the ladder. Here he found a woman rocking a child. At the sight of her, looking so changed by all that she had suffered, for his sake, his heart was moved by such love and longing, and by so great a pity that he suddenly became a man. The princess stood up when she saw him, and her heart beat with fear, for she did not know him. But when he had told her who he was, in her great joy, she forgot all her sufferings, and they seemed as nothing to her. He was a very handsome man, as straight as a fir tree. They sat down together, and she told him all her adventures, and he wept with pity at the tale. And then he told her his own history. I am a king's son. Once, when my father was fighting against some dragons who were the scourge of our country, I slew the youngest dragon. His mother, who was a witch, cast a spell over me and changed me into a pig. It was she who, in the disguise of an old woman, gave you the thread to bind round my foot, so that instead of the 3 days that had to run before the spell was broken, I was forced to remain a pig for 3 more years. Now that we have suffered for each other and have found each other again, let us forget the past. And in their joy, they kissed one another. Next morning, they set out early to return to his father's kingdom. Great was the rejoicing of all the people when they saw him and his wife. His father and his mother embraced them both, and there was feasting in the palace for 3 days and 3 nights. Then they set out to see her father. The old king nearly went out of his mind with joy at beholding his daughter again. When she had told him all her adventures, he said to her, "Did not I tell you that I was quite sure that that creature who wooed and won you as his wife had not been born a pig? You see, my child, how wise you were in doing what I told you. And as the king was old and had no heirs, he put them on the throne in his place. And they ruled as only kings rule who have suffered many things. And if they are not dead, they are still living and ruling happily. The Norka. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen. They had 3 sons, 2 of them with their wits about them, but the third, a simpleton. Now the king had a deer park in which were quantities of wild animals of different kinds. Into that park there used to come a huge beast, Norka was its name, and do fearful mischief, devouring some of the animals every night. The king did all he could, but he was unable to destroy it. So at last he called his sons together and said, "Whoever will destroy the Norka to him, will I give the half of my kingdom." Well, the eldest son undertook the task. As soon as it was night, he took his weapons and set out. But before he reached the park, he went into a traktier or tavern, and there he spent the whole night in revelry. When he came to his senses, it was too late. The day had already dawned. He felt himself disgraced in the eyes of his father, but there was no help for it. The next day, the second son went and did just the same. Their father scolded them both soundly, and there was an end of it. Well, on the third day, the youngest son undertook the task. They all laughed him to scorn because he was so stupid, feeling sure he wouldn't do anything. But he took his arms and went straight into the park and sat down on the grass in such a position that the moment he went asleep, his weapons would prick him and he would awake. Presently, the midnight hour sounded. The earth began to shake, and the Norka came rushing up and burst right through the fence into the park, so huge was it. The prince pulled himself together, leapt to his feet, crossed himself, and went straight at the beast. It fled back, and the prince ran after it. But he soon saw that he couldn't catch it on foot, so he hastened to the stable, laid his hands on the best horse there, and set off in pursuit. Presently, he came up with the beast, and they began a fight. They fought and fought. The prince gave the beast 3 wounds. At last, they were both utterly exhausted, so they lay down to take a short rest. But the moment the prince closed his eyes, up jumped the beast, and took to flight. The prince's horse awoke him. Up he jumped in a moment and set off again in pursuit, caught up the beast, and again began fighting with it. Again the prince gave the beast 3 wounds, and then he and the beast lay down again to rest. Thereupon away fled the beast as before. The prince caught it up and again gave it 3 wounds. But all of a sudden, just as the prince began chasing it for the 4th time, the beast fled to a great white stone, tilted it up, and escaped into the other world, crying out to the prince, "Then only will you overcome me when you enter here." The prince went home, told his father all that had happened, and asked him to have a leather rope plaited long enough to reach to the other world. His father ordered this to be done. When the rope was made, the prince called for his brothers, and he and they, having taken servants with them, and everything that was needed for a whole year, set out for the place where the beast had disappeared under the stone. When they got there, they built a palace on the spot and lived in it for some time. But when everything was ready, the youngest brother said to the others, "Now, brothers, who is going to lift this stone?" Neither of them could so much as stir it, but as soon as he touched it away, it flew to a distance, though it was ever so big, big as a hill. And when he had flung the stone aside, he spoke a second time to his brothers, saying, "Who is going into the other world to overcome the Norka?" Neither of them offered to do so. Then he laughed at them for being such cowards, and said, "Well, brothers, farewell. Lower me into the other world, and don't go away from here. But as soon as the cord is jerked, pull it up." His brothers lowered him accordingly, and when he had reached the other world underneath the earth, he went on his way. He walked and walked. Presently, he espied a horse with rich trappings, and it said to him, "Hail, Prince Ivan, long have I awaited thee." He mounted the horse and rode on, rode and rode, until he saw standing before him a palace made of copper. He entered the courtyard, tied up his horse, and went indoors. In one of the rooms, a dinner was laid out. He sat down and dined, and then went into a bedroom. There, he found a bed on which he lay down to rest. Presently, there came in a lady more beautiful than can be imagined anywhere but in a fairy tale, who said, "Thou who art in my house, name thyself. If thou art an old man, thou shalt be my father. If a middle-aged man, my brother. But if a young man, thou shalt be my husband, dear. And if thou art a woman, and an old one, thou shalt be my grandmother. If middle-aged, my mother. And if a girl, thou shalt be my own sister. Thereupon he came forth. And when she saw him, she was delighted with him, and said, Wherefore, O Prince Ivan, my husband, dear shalt thou be, wherefore hast thou come hither? Then he told her all that had happened, and she said, That beast which thou wishest to overcome is my brother. He is staying just now with my second sister, who lives not far from here in a silver palace. I bound up 3 of the wounds which thou didst give him. Well, after this they drank and enjoyed themselves and held sweet converse together. And then the prince took leave of her and went on to the second sister, the one who lived in the silver palace, and with her also he stayed a while. She told him that her brother Norka was then at her youngest sister's. So he went on to the youngest sister, who lived in a golden palace. She told him that her brother was at that time asleep on the blue sea, and she gave him a sword of steel and a draught of the water of strength, and she told him to cut off her brother's head at a single stroke. And when he had heard these things, he went his way. And when the prince came to the blue sea, he looked, there slept the Norka on a stone in the middle of the sea. And when it snored, the water was agitated for 7 miles around. The prince crossed himself, went up to it, and smote it on the head with his sword. The head jumped off, saying the while, Well, I'm done for now, and rolled far away into the sea. After killing the beast, the prince went back again, picking up all the 3 sisters, by the way, with the intention of taking them out into the upper world, for they all loved him and would not be separated from him. Each of them turned her palace into an egg, for they were enchantresses, and they taught him how to turn the eggs into palaces and back again, and they handed over the eggs to him. And then they all went to the place from which they had to be hoisted into the upper world. And when they came to where the rope was, the prince took hold of it and made the maidens fast to it. Then he jerked away at the rope, and his brothers began to haul it up. And when they had hauled it up, and had set eyes on the wondrous maidens, they went aside and said, Let's lower the rope, pull our brother part of the way up, and then cut the rope. Perhaps he'll be killed, but then if he isn't, he'll never give us these beauties. as wives. So when they had agreed on this, they lowered the rope. But their brother was no fool. He guessed what they were at, so he fastened the rope to a stone and then gave it a pull. His brothers hoisted the stone to a great height and then cut the rope. Down fell the stone and broke in pieces. The prince poured forth tears and went away. Well, he walked and walked. Presently, a storm arose. The lightning flashed, the thunder roared, the rain fell in torrents. He went up to a tree in order to take shelter under it, and on that tree he saw some young birds which were being thoroughly drenched. So he took off his coat and covered them over with it, and he himself sat down under the tree. Presently, there came flying a bird, such a big one that the light was blotted out by it. It had been dark there before, but now it became darker still. Now this was the mother of those small birds which the prince had covered up. And when the bird had come flying up, she perceived that her little ones were covered over, and she said, "Who has wrapped up my nestlings?" And presently, seeing the prince, she added, "Didst thou do that? Thanks in return. Ask of me anything thou desirest. I will do anything for thee." "Then carry me into the other world," he replied. "Make me a large vessel with a partition in the middle," she said. "Catch all sorts of game and put them into one half of it, and into the other half pour water, so that there may be meat and drink for me." All this the prince did. Then the bird, having taken the vessel on her back, with the prince sitting in the middle of it, began to fly. And after flying some distance, she brought him to his journey's end, took leave of him, and flew away back. But he went to the house of a certain tailor and engaged himself as his servant. So much the worse for wear. Was he so thoroughly, had he altered in appearance, that nobody would have suspected him of being a prince. Having entered into the service of this master, the prince began to ask what was going on in that country. And his master replied, "Our 2 princes, for the third one has disappeared, have brought away brides from the other world, and want to marry them, but those brides refuse. For they insist on having all their wedding clothes made for them, first exactly like those which they used to have in the other world, and that without being measured for them. The king has called all the workmen together, but not one of them will undertake to do it. The prince, having heard all this, said, "Go to the king-master and tell him that you will provide everything that's in your line. However, can I undertake to make clothes of that sort? I work for quite common folks," says his master. "Go along, master. I will answer for everything," says the prince. So the tailor went. The king was delighted that at least one good workman had been found, and gave him as much money as ever he wanted. When his tailor had settled everything, he went home. And the prince said to him, "Now then, pray to God, and lie down to sleep. Tomorrow all will be ready." And the tailor followed his lad's advice and went to bed. Midnight sounded. The prince arose, went out of the city into the fields, took out of his pocket the eggs which the maidens had given him, and as they had taught him, turned them into 3 palaces. Into each of these he entered, took the maidens' robes, went out again, turned the palaces back into eggs, and went home. And when he got there, he hung up the robes on the wall and lay down to sleep. Early in the morning, his master awoke, and behold, there hung such robes as he had never seen before, all shining with gold and silver and precious stones. He was delighted, and he seized them and carried them off to the king. When the princesses saw that the clothes were those which had been theirs in the other world, they guessed that Prince Ivan was in this world. So they exchanged glances with each other, but they held their peace. And the master, having handed over the clothes, went home. But he no longer found his dear journeyman there, for the prince had gone to a shoemaker's, and him too he sent to work for the king. And in the same way he went the round of all the artificers, and they all proffered him thanks, inasmuch as through him they were enriched by the king. By the time the princely workmen had gone the round of all the artificers, the princesses had received what they had asked for. All their clothes were just like what they had been in the other world. Then they wept bitterly because the prince had not come, and it was impossible for them to hold out any longer. It was necessary that they should be married. But when they were ready for the wedding, the youngest bride said to the king, "Allow me, my father, to go and give alms to the beggars." He gave her leave, and she went and began bestowing alms upon them, and examining them closely. And when she had come to one of them, and was going to give him some money, she caught sight of the ring which she had given to the prince in the other world, and her sister's rings too, for it really was he. So she seized him by the hand and brought him into the hall, and said to the king, "Here is he who brought us out of the other world. His brothers forbade us to say that he was alive, threatening to slay us if we did." Then the king was wroth with those sons, and punished them as he thought best. And afterwards 3 weddings were celebrated.